This script kind of made its rounds in Hollywood, and everybody was flipping for it. And if there was some kind of familiar conversation about me beforehand, I don't know what it was. And then I just took the meeting, and I went in and completely blew the reading because Byron has pretty foul mouth, and the scene that I had to read was when I was telling the inmates the rules of Shawshank, and had some awful things to say. And it's fine on the day when you're dressed up in the suits and you're in the place, and even an audition, if you say it to somebody that you think needs to be intimidated, as far as I'm concerned. But I had to say it to this very cute, well-dressed, well-made-up, good-smelling casting director, and I could not get the words. I couldn't say these awful things to this woman, and I just finally apologized to Frank. I said, I can't say these things to her. It's just not right. I'm not that good of an actor. And I guess he got a big kick out of that, and for some reason decided to cast me. I have no idea. It's the worst audition I ever had in the best movie I've ever done, so go figure. I read it when we were in negotiations for it, and loved it. My first exposure was the script, and I was blown away by the script, but then further appreciated the script after reading the short story, or the novella, as they call it, because it's such a good adaptation job, I thought. I had a very sweet actress come up to me once and said, "Oh, he had something else going for him. I said, "No, he didn't. He was mean and stupid and and a bigot, and name it. He was just a hateful person." And she was being very sweet, trying to compliment me, saying that I added some kind of subtlety. And if I had added any kind of subtlety, it was completely unintentional, and it's completely wrong, because he is not anything but what he appears to be. How did I feel about playing that? I don't like to play those roles, necessarily, although I've played a lot of them. But you have to, a poem like that script was, you want to do anything in it. And it's sort of not an issue of what the, how gentle and how attractive the part is. It's really just being a part of something that you think is going to be worthwhile, and fulfilling any of those, any of the pieces of that puzzle is worthwhile. Like I said, the script was so good. It's very clear what that is. The one moment that I had where I was having a terrible actor moment, lots of self-doubt, I was with, my trailer was right next to Bob Gunton's, who played the warden, and I started agonizing about it, feeling insecure about this and that and the other, and said, geez, I'm just thinking there's not much to do here. It's so sort of two-dimensional. And Bob looked at me like I was insane. Bob comes from a good musical theater background, so he's used to playing big characters in big things, and I'm really used to being a little more realistic and naturalistic. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't real. This isn't a documentary we're doing. This is a play. It's a play about memory. We're supposed to be icons. We're supposed to be the worst of the worst, and Andy is the best of the best. We personify whatever we need to personify. It has nothing to do with the humanity of our characters, which put me right in my place, and made me very confident then to go on and do whatever cartoony thing I felt like doing. Well, that hope springs eternal, and that no matter how dark the situation, the human spirit can always overcome as long as it retains some truth to itself, you know. And that's what Andy did. That's what Andy represented to Red. And Red is really at the center of the piece. I mean, it's really about Red. It's Red's journey. It's not so much Andy's journey, is my interpretation. And so it's because it's Red's memory, and it's really about the humanity of Red and how he rediscovers his humanity through this immensely human fellow inmate, a man who just either refused to give up his humanity or just was incapable of losing it. And Andy Dufresne, which is, you know, that's a beautiful role too. But as much of a cartoon as Hadley or the Warden, I think. The place was awful. The place was built at right after the Civil War in Mansfield, Ohio, and had been in operation until a year or 2 years before we filmed there. It had been used as a location before, and it was closed for. It was ordered closed by the Supreme Court of Ohio, I think, for cruel and unusual punishment. They weren't doing anything different. It's just that the conditions had finally, or the conditions were at a point. Wait a minute. No, the conditions hadn't changed. How should I put this? Humanity had evolved to a point where the conditions in that prison were considered inhuman. So, you know, when it was built, it was probably state of the art and just as awful as it was in 1990 when it shut down. But by 1990, we all recognized that no man, no matter how awful the things he's done, should have to live in this situation. It was a typical style for that time, a huge building, very Gothic, two enormous wings that were the cell wings, the prison wings, all, I think, 6 or 7 stories of cells, 6 or 7 tiers of cells, so that if you fell from anything above the 3rd tier, you'd probably die. And big, tall windows that could open a little bit, I think, at the bottom, you know, little push-out windows at the bottom, and one little radiator also at the bottom that would heat you in wintertime. Ohio is a cold state in wintertime, but at least they had a radiator under every window. You got to imagine that in the winter it was as cold as could possibly be on the ground floors, and in the summer it was as hot as it could possibly be on the upper tiers. It was an awful, awful, awful place. It was so awful, actually, Terrence Marsh decided not to use it and built his own version of an awful, awful prison, which is based on Kilmainham Jail. That's the Kilmainham thing. We did a little research. We went around, we took a tour of the new facility, which was very much like a college campus, very state-of-the-art, very much like Oz, the HBO thing. And that didn't help me at all. And they were very good to us. They had a liaison officer who actually came to me at one point and said, do you want to sit down and talk to any of these guards? And I said, listen, I don't know if you've read this script, but the last thing you want me to do is say that I base this on the Ohio State correctional officers, because I'm an awful, awful person. And so I did not sit down with any of these guys. I have in the past in other projects sat down and talked to corrections officers, and they're a breed apart. I mean, they're a combination tough guy, social worker. They have the hardest job in the world, and it wears on them. And I've not met one that I thought even approached a sliver of the evil that Byron Hadley was. I mean, most of them are highly educated, psychological masters of their fields, and so I didn't really want to represent them as that way. I know that Tim talked to prisoners and stayed in solitary, and some of the other guys did that stuff, but that's a different deal. I think maybe Bob might have gotten together with a warden, but I stayed away from it. Most of the scenes were so brief, I was only worried about not messing up my stuff. And the one big long scene on the rooftop, I was actually worried about getting the day over with because I was supposed to drive up to Chicago and get married that weekend. So that's really what was on my mind. And that ended up being a long day. So, did Tim and I do any extra stuff? Well, maybe he did, but I didn't. I didn't do anything consciously. We played basketball together, and I used to foul him on purpose, just try to intimidate him physically that way. But, he's a big, tough guy. He wasn't intimidated. Nah, we're actors. We acted. I don't know. It's a great movie. I don't know why. I wish I could say that there was some lightning struck at some point and brought us all together or tore us all apart in such a way that made it happen. But it's got to rest squarely on the shoulders of Frank. It really does. The credit just has to be his, which you wouldn't say if he hadn't written the script. But he directed it well, he wrote it brilliantly, and we just couldn't make a mistake, I guess. He was not, he didn't over-direct anyone. He was, if there's any tricks that he pulled, I think he didn't, any psychological things in order to get performances out of somebody, if that's what you're talking about. I don't think he did anything like that. I think he just had a caliber of actor there that was able to use whatever they needed to use. If anything, I would say that being in Mansfield, Ohio for much of the cast was a little bit like being in prison, because it's a very depressed place now. It used to be the center of the state and the center of industry there, and now it's completely depressed and run down and fallen apart. And you had some city boys. You had people from LA, people from New York, people from Chicago that were used to having a big metropolis with things to do, places to drink, girls to meet. Wasn't there. And so we sort of had to hang out with each other. And maybe that was the lightning in a bottle that happened, but that would be the only thing I could think of. There was also a healthy rivalry between the New Yorkers and the Chicagoans, but that's about all. I didn't see it manifest itself necessarily on the screen or anything. But hey, I might be wrong. I was a guard. Gunton and I didn't hang out. I was a guard. I was on my own. I hated them all equally. First of all, you said hit, and then you said, good movie, favorite movie. Very few of those are the same things, And I don't think Shawshank necessarily qualifies as a hit, because I don't think it opened as strongly as some of these other shows. Is it a brilliant piece of cinema art? Yeah, it is. But you go talk to John Frankenheimer and he'll disagree with you. He'll tell you that Birdman of Alcatraz is a better movie. He's wrong, but I like Birdman of Alcatraz. But this is better than that. Do the studios have a clue about how to make something? No, they don't have a clue about it. That's why I say it's squarely on Frank's shoulders. This got made the way it got made because the script was as strong as it was, because Stephen King's name was in it, and because Castle Rock was behind it as strongly as it was. But nobody expected it to be the second favorite movie of all time. I haven't followed it. I'll be honest with you. I've stayed away from it as much as possible. Not consciously. It's just that I think it's great that it's that it's well loved, but I have not been a student of it. It doesn't need my help. It doesn't need my attention, obviously. You know, you want to sit down and talk to me about Starship Troopers and how brilliant I think that movie is, I'll do that for days, and I'll tell you all the reasons. But this movie doesn't need my help. You know, it's poetry. It's poetry, and it's stayed poetry through all of the travails that these stories have to go through, from the time it's the novella to the time it's on screen. I mean, it's withstood it. And, you know, no small credit goes to Stephen King, too, I guess. But Frank is the premier interpreter of King, I think is clear.